I was never quite as out on the team as some fans seem to be when things
Yeah.
weren't going well early in the season. They weren't playing well, but I also knew that those players were capable of more than they had shown at that point. The Pop injury, that kind of like, all right, maybe it isn't Creighton season at
Mhm.
this point. I still believe they could be a really good team, but I thought the margin for error was so slim that it was going to be hard to put together a really good record.
You're listening to the Blue Jay Breakdown.
Welcome back into Blue Jay Breakdown. Anna and Jacob joining you now to talk Creighton men's hoops first. What an exciting weekend of Blue Jay basketball with the win at Villanova. Want to start though 9-2 in the Big East. That is the best start that Creighton's ever had in the Big East. What was your initial reaction to that game and watching it on TV?
Yeah, it matches the first season in the Big East with
Mhm.
Doug McDermott's crew. So I don't know that anybody saw that coming when Creighton dropped that first conference game to Georgetown. Things weren't looking good at that point, but credit to Greg McDermott and his staff and this team for turning things around and really figuring it out. And that's what we continue to see is this team just finds ways to win. Doesn't at this point early in the season, it seemed like there was only one way that they were going to be able to win. You needed Kalkbrenner, you needed Ashworth to just be putting up big point totals and then hope to get just barely enough, maybe a big game from Jemiah Neal or whatever to get the win. Now they're winning with offense, they're winning with defense, they're winning with those guys being stars, they're winning with the bench players stepping up. And the Villanova game was another example of that, of them just kind of winning in different ways. I mean, you look at conference play only. I mean, right now they're tied for second in the league play behind St. John's at 10-1, and St. John's has not played any of the other top teams except for the loss at Creighton so far. So they've got a tough slate coming up. I mean, a conference title is very much within reach for Creighton. They are fourth in offense and fourth in defense in the Big East play per KenPom. First in effective field goal percentage, 2-point percentage, and limiting offensive rebounding percentage and free throw rate for their opponents. So it's that's Greg McDermott basketball. That's Ryan
Yeah.
Kalkbrenner basketball. Like, this Creighton team has kind of settled into the way that McDermott wants them to play. And I mean, you look at the Villanova game, 62-60 final. I think they're 3-0 now when both teams have failed to reach 70 points. So they've shown they can win those grinder games, even when things aren't going kind of their way for stretches of it. Rough shooting game, but Creighton found a way to get it done.
And I think it makes it even more unique too they lost Pop Isaacs, a guy that they thought was going to be a ball handler for them. And you've seen the bumps and the bumps along the way with that and the turnovers and Ashworth having to carry a lot more of that load. But just the job that Greg McDermott's done, I think, he's got to be up for Coach of the Year in the Big East with what he's been able to accomplish this season. But would you have ever guessed this, Jacob? Obviously you're very close to the program, but would you know that Greg would figure it out to this point, knowing you lost Pop and to be 9-2 in Big East play?
I was never quite as out on the team as some fans seem to be when things
Yeah.
weren't going well early in the season. They weren't playing well, but I also knew that those players were capable of more than they had shown at that point. The Pop injury, that kind of like, all right, maybe it isn't Creighton season at
Mhm.
this point. I still believe they could be a really good team, but I thought the margin for error was so slim that it was going to be hard to put together a really good record. But they found a way to get it done. And again, it's another example of McDermott teams getting better as the season goes on. His program's done very well in January over the years, and this is another example of that. Now Creighton's won 7 in a row, is it? They are on fire right now.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into the specific wins, 86-77 against Xavier at home. And McDermott mentioned like, hey, this is a big one, and he wanted the fans to show up. And I think at first we weren't sure if it was going to be an electric crowd, but I think as the game went on, those seats were definitely filled, and it got loud in there for a Wednesday night. But yeah, it was a big one. Xavier had won 4 of the last 5, and Creighton found a way to take that halftime lead of only 5 points and stretch that out in the second half. But what was your biggest takeaway from that Xavier win?
Off the bat, the McDermott said shoot or shoot in the postgame press conference, and 3 of 15 from 3 in the first half, then 8 of 10 in the second half. They trusted their shots and found a rhythm, and that was enough to close out the game. I mean, Xavier rallied back to tie it up at 61 all, and then Creighton finished the game on a 26-15 run over the last 9.5 minutes. And Isaac Trout was big again, 12 points off the bench, hit 2 threes in the second half, and he's now made his last 12 after halftime at CHI Health Center, dating back to the UNLV game, which is kind of a crazy stat. He just does not miss threes after halftime at home this season. So he's become an important piece of it. Jemiah Neal had maybe the highlight of the year with that transition dunk on Ryan Conwell. Which he personally only ranks second on his list behind kind of a steal and windmill and one against Texas Southern last year at Arizona State. But the story of the game, Ryan Kalkbrenner.
Yeah.
He just another fantastic performance. Finished with 29 points on 12 of 17 shooting, hit both of his threes, which he hadn't hit a 3 in a few games. So he kind of got the lid off the rim from there. With 3-4 from the line, 9 rebounds and 3 assists. And in the process, he moved into second place on Creighton's career scoring chart, behind only Doug McDermott, who he would need another year or two to catch. As good as he is, Doug's scoring titles feels pretty safe.
Yeah.
Top 10 scorer all time. But he also participated in his 108th career victory at Creighton, which broke a record with McDermott, Johans Manigat, and Ethan Raggi for the most in program history. And it's obviously like getting the 5th year kind of impacts all these records that he's breaking and these milestones and kind of these unique stats that he finds himself in. That being said, he's not doing anything different than a lot of other players have done over the last 4 or 5 years. And he has continued to elevate his game every year. And has now become one of the absolute best players in the country and is playing at that level.
Do you think Ryan Kalkbrenner gets enough national respect?
So I think the stretch where Creighton dropped the games and teams were triple teaming him on every single possession kind of took him out of the national spotlight, because I think everybody was ready to give him his flowers going into the year. Obviously, he had the 49-point game to open it. Everybody knew how good he was, Big East Defensive Player of the Year. So he was kind of on all those lists early on. And then Creighton struggles and, again, defensive game plan against him kind of took him out of that. I think we're now starting to see Creighton gain a little bit more traction. I know they finally cracked John Fanta's top 25 after he said a couple weeks ago that go 2-0 this week. And we'll see. They've done that like 3 straight weeks now, but they're still outside the AP poll a little bit. But they're moving closer, and I think obviously now in the thick of the Big East race, they're kind of moving back into the national consciousness. And with that, I think Kalkbrenner is starting to get a little bit more respect and attention. I mean, that's largely what a lot of it comes down to is you have to win to earn the accolades and garner the respect, and Creighton's doing that now.
All right, let's move on to the 62-60 win at Villanova. Very exciting. I was actually sitting in the airport, and I basically jumped up at the end of this game because I was like, oh my goodness, I could not believe my eyes. But I think what made this game special and the ending special was the 2 guys who made what seemed to be costly mistakes ended up winning the game for them. One being Stephen Ashworth missing that, airballing that 3.
Yeah. After the turnover that gave Villanova the lead. Yeah,
exactly. Like after his turnover too. And then Jasen Green with, I guess, didn't see the shot clock. I don't know. Ran out of time through a pass to Jemiah Neal that was never going to get there in time before that shot clock ran out. But and then Jasen ends up having an incredible save calls a timeout midair, which is allowed in NCAA basketball now. It's a new rule. So he knew that rule, called that timeout. They keep the possession. Greg McDermott draws up an incredible inbounding play, and Stephen Ashworth somehow banks a three from the corner, which I've never seen ever in my life besides maybe a game of horse. So it was an incredible ending. What were your thoughts during that, especially first with those mistakes and then to see that rebound?
Yeah, I'll start with Ashworth. And it really was kind of a wild game. Definitely not his best, but man, he showed up when they really needed him to. Creighton was down 50-45 in the second half, and that was the most separation anybody had. It was a 2-possession game the entire second half. Villanova looked like, all right, here they go. They're taking control here. What's going to happen? And then Ashford hit a tough three off the dribble, then found Kalkbrenner on a sick alley-oop, and then fed Kalkbrenner inside again, which on that play, he was literally being hugged and ended up being a no call, which I will never understand the way the Big East officials treat defense in the post, particularly with what we've seen thrown at Kalkbrenner this season. But regardless of that, the 7-0 run to get Creighton back in front, then Villanova tied it, and then he hit another three to put them up 57-54. And then obviously he had the back-to-back mistakes there with the bad turnover and then the air ball three, but he got a second chance and said sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And I think it's a little bit of both on at the end there. It was like you said, it was a great play. It was a 2-man game between Ashworth and Kalkbrenner. It was always going to be one of those two. They cleared everybody else out. Ashworth just set a screen for Kalkbrenner, then popped to the corner. Both guys, it's a 1-point game, so they both went with Kalkbrenner. Ashworth knew he'd have space and time. Jasen Green got him the ball. Back putting into the corner, though, kind of not the easiest shot where he's got his feet set and all that. Probably impacted the momentum that sent the ball into the backboard, but found the perfect spot and it fell in. And then on the other end, they got the stop on Eric Dixon to secure the victory. And that was the key to the game, was limiting Dixon at 17 points on what was it? 17 points on 5 of 14 shooting and 6 of 7 from 3. Like, it's the first time that he had scored under 20 in the he had scored 20 in 6 straight games against Creighton. And the key to that was Jasen Green. So not only did he make that incredible play at the end to give Creighton that second chance at the go-ahead shot with the jumping out of bounds and the timeout. And again, credit to him. That's why it's important to listen to things in practice and when people come and give you presentations, because he remembered the Big East representatives coming in and telling them about that rule change. And he knew that, hey, he didn't really have anybody that he could safely throw it back into. So he went for the timeout instead. He knew they had one left and he used it, and Creighton benefited from it. So not only did he make that play at the end, but he played 32 minutes, which is the second most of the season behind only the 35 he played in the first game against Villanova. And that's despite having 4 turnovers and really struggling on offense. It's because of his defense on Eric Dixon, who the nation's leading scorer, 24.5 points a game going in. Again, had lit up Creighton every matchup that they played him. And Green just did a great. He was big enough and quick enough to be able to stay with him for the most part, and disciplined enough to stay down on his pump fakes, to know what he was trying to do, to not bite on any of that stuff, and just made him work for every single bucket that he got. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily Jason's best offensive game. And in fact, he struggled a little bit, but despite that, they still won his minutes by 6. They needed him on the court to defend Dixon, and he did a fantastic job. Yeah. And that was the key to the game, because again, they scored 62 points and won. They were 6 of 26 from 3 with 18 turnovers, and found a way to win the game. And that's because of their defense.
Yeah. And that stat line with the turnovers probably never wins Creighton a basketball game typically. So
St. John's. So the last time they won a game with both teams scoring under 60. Well, I guess the UConn as well was the other one. So those are the 3 games, UConn, Villanova, and St. John's, where neither team has reached 70 and Creighton still found a way to get a win.
Yeah. All right. Well, looking ahead at Providence Wednesday, biggest keys there for this Creighton team to keep on this roll, because we know that the Duncan Center, is that what they call it there?
I think it's the Ant now.
Okay, it's
Yeah,
Amp now. It used to be the
yeah.
Dunkin' Donuts, I swear.
Used to be the Dunk. Yeah,
It
I
used to be
believe
the Dunk
I
'cause I
believe
love
that's the one that. Yeah, I
but
believe it's the Amp now.
a tough place to play, whatever it's called, uh, and a place that Creighton has struggled in the past at before. So what are your biggest keys for that matchup?
Yeah. One, don't look ahead to Marquette. You got to stay locked in. And I think this team generally does a pretty good job of that. Like the coaching staff doesn't let them look ahead as much as possible. Obviously, there's a little bit of human nature there, but Creighton won the matchup at Omaha by 20. And the key to that was one, the 3-point line. Creighton hit 14 of them, and they held Providence to just 4. And the big reason for that is they held Jane Pierre and Benzie Joseph to a combined 9 points on 3 of 19 shooting, who were their top 2 scorers. And so that was a credit to the perimeter defenders who did a fantastic job in that game. And that's going to have to be the key again. They've got to go do a good job locking those guys down. And if you're gonna lose, it's got to be from somebody else having a big game. Nobody. I think 10 points was their leading score or something like that in the previous matchup. So, make other guys beat you and replicate the defensive game plan. And then hopefully it's a good shooting day. They got to knock down some shots on the road, which isn't always easy.
And then the big one at home against Marquette. Obviously, a UConn win is huge, but it feels like getting Marquette might be an even bigger challenge and even bigger of a reward. Obviously, with the net rankings and all of that and what Marquette's done this year, but they lose at their place 79-71, and now you have an opportunity to get them at home. Is it possible for Creighton to beat them at home? Because obviously they've been a great team at CHI Health Center, but what needs to happen for that to occur, and how will that build into this run that they already have and potential for March?
Yeah, well, we talked about kind of how the front loaded schedule a little bit for some of these teams, and now Marquette's in its tough stretch. They just lost at home to UConn 77-69 on Saturday, and as we record this on Tuesday, they're facing St. John's before coming to Omaha. So basically, they're playing the top 30 other teams in the league in a row, just like Creighton's about to. So they're gonna be kind of beat up coming into this one. Creighton's got to be ready, take care of business against Providence, and then gear up for this one. But you mentioned the 79-71 loss, and that was with Ashburner and Kalkbrenner both struggling mightily offensively in the ways that they normally excel. So, key is Ashworth not going 1 for 13 from 3 again, or Kalkbrenner going 4 of 11 on 2s or whatever he was. That right there is the biggest key. Have your guys play like stars, like they're capable of. Limit light bulb turnovers and handle the pressure again. We saw Ashworth, despite the shooting struggles, had 10 assists, 1 turnover, but Creighton still did have some important turnovers that led to points on the other end. You cannot give them runouts, can't give them transition opportunities off of turnovers. And then finally, they have to keep Cam Jones in check again. They did a great job of that with him. He eventually got going. Like, he's too good of a player to be held down the entire game, but they made him work. Ended up, I think, scoring as many points as he took shots. They really held him in check in that first half. So, like, he is the key to that whole thing offensively. They got a lot of tough guys, a lot of defensive players, a lot of role players around him. Jones is the one guy that can beat you nearly by himself. So it's going to be another big game for Jemiah Neal and the other guys that take a turn. Ashworth, whoever else ends up being tasked with chasing Jones around the court.
Yeah. So a few big opportunities for the Blue Jays. On the women's side, flipping over to that, 10-1 in the Big East. Of course, that only lost to UConn in second place right now in the conference. It's kind of been UConn, Creighton, and everybody else this year. But you look at Molly Mogensen and what she's done. She's been such a bright spot. We know she didn't have the best start of the year necessarily, but has really found her groove of recent, Jacob.
Yeah, Big East Player of the Week, averaged 19.5 points on 73% shooting, 71% from 3, 7.5 boards, and 6 assists last week. And feel like we've talked about her with 3 straight pods. I talked about her early in the season as someone who I thought needed to step up for them and was capable of it. And boy, has she. She scored in double figures in 6 straight games now. Previous best had been 4 in her career, which she'd only done once. And now she's done it 6 straight. Averaging over 17 points on 58% shooting, 56% from 3, and 80% from the line. plus 6 boards and 5.2 assists during that stretch. And I think the key is in the first 16 games, she attempted just over 6 shots a game. In the last 6, she is up to 11.8. So nearly doubling her shot attempt. So it's the aggression. She's hunting out that pull-up jumper. She's shooting the catch and shoot threes with confidence. And it's been a huge pressure release for Morgan, Molly, and Lauren Jensen, who Morgan didn't have a great week last week. And so they needed somebody else to step up. Molly had been carrying them all Big East season long. We know obviously that Lauren Jensen kind of went through a slump recently. So to have Mogenson step up in the way that she has been huge for this team to maintain their standing.
Well, when you think about Lauren Jensen and Morgan Molly, how big has it been having Molly Mogensen there as a consistent third option? Like, how good can this team be when Molly's on as well as LJ and Morgan?
Yeah, it just increases the margin for error and, again, takes the pressure off those two. I think going into the year, kind of looked at it as like obviously losing Emma Ronsick. They needed Jensen and Molly to be on every single game to have a chance to beat good teams. And for a stretch of this year, that's kind of the way it looked. Like, obviously, they're two of the leading scorers in the Big East, both averaging over 17 a game. That great players, but it's hard to be a great player 30 games a year or whatever, however many you're going to end up playing. Like, everybody's going to have some off shooting nights. So it's important to have others capable of stepping up. And that's what Mogensen has done. And it's been particularly important because Keani Lockett obviously missed the UConn game. She was limited, came off the bench in the Georgetown win, and then was back in the starting lineup. But that's someone that has, at stretches this point, been the third or fourth scorer. And so kind of having her limited or is not as involved or gone entirely, it's been that much more important to have Mogensen step up in the way that she has.
Yeah. All right. Well, looking specifically at the wins, 84-70 win at Georgetown in a game where Mallory Brake also stepped up too. So there's other options on this Creighton team. What were your biggest takeaways there and seeing Lockett come up off the bench as well?
Yeah, near double-double for Brake, 12 points, 9 boards. Again, Keani got back into it, played 6 points in 23 minutes off the bench. So that was good to see for her, only missing 1 game there. Jensen, 6 of 8 from 3, not bad, 22 points. But Mogensen was the best player on the floor. Again, finished with 22 points on 9 of 11 shooting, hit a couple of threes, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. Just a masterful offense performance. Creighton shot 55% from the field, 52% from 3, and 75 from the line with 13 made threes. And they were in control the entire game. I mean, they were up 17 in the fourth before Georgetown cut that down to 7 with just over a minute to play. But then Creighton closed it out with the 7-0 run. So just taking care of business on the road, getting it done, and again having multiple players step up outside of the big two.
And then 79-66 win at home against Providence. Keani Lockett back in that starting lineup. What did you like about that win, especially in the way that they closed out that game?
Yeah, it was kind of a weird game. I was there at Sokol Arena. It was tight kind of throughout. Creighton, Providence scored on 10 of their 14 possessions in the first quarter. They just didn't really have an answer defensively. Creighton eventually kind of got back into it, but then down the stretch they went cold and gave up the lead. And Providence, Creighton had to deal with significant foul trouble. Both Jensen and Molly picked up their 4th in the third quarter, like midway through the third. And that's the kind of disaster zone for Creighton there, having to take both of them off the court for much of the next stretch there. But Providence took a 5-point lead 1 minute into the fourth, and they traded buckets for a bit. And then Creighton took control, 18-2 run to finish the game. They finally stepped up defensively. They started making big plays on that end. They really scrapped. And then offensively, you had different players stepping up, making contributions. I think the star of the game was Jamie Horan. Scored 16 points, hit a couple of threes, had a layup on a good cut to the basket, and then went 8 of 9 at the line, including hitting all her free throws down the stretch to help close it out when Providence was fouling. So they were plus 15 in her 21 minutes, second highest point total of her career, behind the 18 points against Wyoming earlier this season. So we talked about different players stepping up in this game. It was her. Mogenson had 17, 8 boards, 5 assists. So again, another great game for her, which is part of which contributed to that Big East Player of the Week. But it was a rough one for Morgan, Molly, Jensen as well. I mean, they both dealt with foul trouble. They both didn't shoot as well as they're capable of. Molly got to 13 points, but only 5 of 13 from the field. But she did break the school's career 3-point record. And it was kind of funny. I asked Jim Flannery about it in the post game, and in typical Flannery fashion, he took like 5 minutes to answer the question. Took a winding route, telling a story about recruiting Morgan and how he initially wasn't sold on her. He thought like with her physical tools, she should be going more inside more, as opposed to hanging around the 3-point line so much. But Chevy Sansosi, former assistant, who's now at Phoenix Mercury, she convinced him, like, no, we have to go after her. And he went and saw her play with Crete and saw teams triple teaming her in every possession, and understood why she hung out on the 3-point line so much, because that was the only way she could get shots off. So yeah, he did not anticipate seeing her breaking this record when they first started recruiting her, but by the time that she had committed and gotten to campus, he felt like they had a pretty special player on their hands, and was right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, looking ahead against Seton Hall at home on Wednesday night, and then at Villanova, that'll be the first meeting between these two teams this season so far. But with that Seton Hall team, 3-0 after losing a pretty brutal game to UConn 96-36, but a gritty Seton Hall team, a team that knows how to find ways to win as well. They're 8-2 in the conference, so that's apparent. But what kind of challenge do the Pirates pose to the Blue Jays?
Yeah, you talked about it being UConn, Creighton, and then everybody else. Seton Hall is that next team up, but they also, you talked about that brutal performance. They lost by 60 to UConn before that 3-game winning streak, which is pretty insane for UConn to be able to beat the third best team in the league by 60. That being said, they have kind of righted the ship since then. Creighton beat them 72-64 at their place on January 11th. Jensen had an off game, but again, Mogenson stepping up, combining with Molly for 41 points on over 50% shooting, 15 boards, and 9 assists. The key against Seton Hall is Faith Massonis, averaging almost 17 points a game, better than 5 rebounds, better than 3 assists, shooting 37% from 3 as a 6'1" kind of guard forward type. She's a tough matchup. And Savannah Catalan, averaging 13 points a game. She did not play in the first meeting, so she should be back for them. So give them a little bit more firepower. But again, it's a team that Creighton beat at their place, and a team that they should be able to beat at home if they can. Hopefully, they'll be a little bit more locked in and execute a little better than defensively than they did against Providence, and not have to rely on going on a big run at the end to secure a victory.
Mm-hmm. And before we talk to all of you next, this team will also be at Villanova on Saturday. Again, the first meeting this season. 12-10 team, 6-4 in the conference, so middle of the pack there. But Jacob, what are your biggest keys for that one with the Cats?
Yep. Defensively, you got to lock up their backcourt. They got 2 double-digit scorers. Jasmine Basco, 5'7" guard, averaging almost 16 points and 5 assists a game. Tough matchup there. And then Maddie Weber, averaging 12.5 points a game. So Basco, good to have Lockett back in the lineup, because I'm assuming she'll take that Basco matchup to begin with. And then Creighton's going to have to do what they do on the offensive end to get another win on the road.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys next week on Blue Jay Breakdown. Thanks so much for joining.